back with the desk. And of course, we're talking about the resignation of the minister, talking about Uche Nnaji. A lot of factors right in there. In fact, Uyagbomo Fuegbe was making a very vital contribution before that breaking transmission. You were saying something very vital, and you were talking about how systems work in Nigeria. So, as we try to round up.
Yeah, sure. So, I was saying that in private organizations, including here at Global Television, for example, the minimum standard is you apply and then you are considered for unemployment and all of that. But the question is that how it works where you need to appoint ministers? Of course, the answer is no. The president is not a spirit. He's a human being first before he's anything else, all right? So what does he do? He has to rely on certain people whose judgment most times he can trust to be able to appoint ministers ultimately. Who are those people he relies on? He relies on state governors, for instance, especially those within his party. He relies on chieftains in his party, starting with the national chairman and other very influential figures within the party. He relies on A-list traditional rulers to recommend all these people. So in most cases, he knows next to nothing about some of them. In fact, we are saying in this country where a former president has said that he didn't know one of the persons he had nominated for appointment had passed. All right, so that list had to be taken back to the presidency. They had to, quote unquote, re-engineer that list before it was sent back to the Senate. So that's how the process is. But the question is, what are some of the problems with that process? I'll give you an example. When Trump won election in December of 2016 in the US, before he got sworn in on 20th of January in 2017, he had already known those who were going to hold key positions. In fact, he was already having meetings with them, he was already having briefings with them, he was already having strategy sessions with them. In the case of Nigeria, the president is announced, or the winner is announced in an election, let's say in March, for example, before the end of March, all right? By May 29, when the president is sworn in, we still don't have an idea who is going to be who. Most times what you have is maybe a bunch of persons who are just going to be talking on behalf of the president. Even at that, you still don't know who officially is the spokesperson for the president or for the government at that point in time. Which means we bring so much of politics into the process and little of strategy into it. So this Chief Nnaji case is not just a matter of, it's not a one-off instance. It is a centrality of the problems that we deal with in terms of how people emerge in leadership positions.
All right, that's basic. But then I think the issue of certificate forgery, it's not just with the political office holders alone. It is one menace that has eaten very deeply into the society. Because don't be surprised that even at the secondary school level, people going to look for a job. There is this forgery. It's a corruption. Now, these things happen not just at the top. It happens even at the bottom. How did we get here? And what is responsible for this? Because I'm asking this question because Nigerians are very brilliant people. Nigerians, anyone that wants to go to school and face it squarely and come out triumphantly, as the case may be for those who are serious about school. If it's either you're in school or you are not in school, but then what has actually informed this certificate forgery in Nigeria?
You know, like you rightly mentioned, Nigerians are very resilient and very intelligent people, championing sectors both home and abroad. But now, the problem now is that a whole lot of persons have actually, you know, gotten into this forgery act, like you mentioned, from the secondary school, even primary school. But the problem is they've seen a lot of persons that have done this and then escaped it and then got the desired result they wanted with that fake or forged certificate. And then when they go back and then someone who is in school, who is battling, trying to make it all true, study properly and then get good grades, you know, like they would say, conversations, people have conversations and then somehow it comes out and then someone now will get influenced negatively to also go and do it, and then they'll be like, Lagbaja did his own now and then it worked for him. You know, Abdullahi did his own and he also worked for him. Then you, come on, go and try. All of these individuals will get recommended to those who are actually doing all of this. So the problem now, sanitization needs to start from our schools.
Meaning as it is, there are so many people who are using forged certificate that has not been caught.
That have not been caught. It's possible. It's possible. Okay, we've heard so for some ministers, and we'll still hear more when the elections will start coming and campaigns. We heard that for President Muhammadu Buhari, we heard for our current president, and also we've been hearing, and we'll still hear more. But the problem now is, to solve it now, is we need to go back to grassroots. We need to go back to our schools and then, sanitize that environment, because that is where all of these things come from. Because anybody that wants to forge whatever it is he wants to forge, you can't just go to a cyber cafe and forge it. You have to go somewhere, to a school, to someone that knows someone, to be able to get that thing done. So the problem that needs to go back to our school and then start tackling it. We saw reports to just this past NYSC guys, where the DG said they spotted over 200 fake certificates. You understand? So all of those things can be taken care of if a proper system is in place.
All right. All of this can be taken care of if a proper system is in place. But the question is, who is going to put up the proper system? Let's get started. It's a question of that. Because if we are having this issue, all right from people in authority, leaders, this is, how these things happen in Nigeria, that people look at those in front, the leaders, as mentors somehow. Like you said, it's true. But they feel, well, this person is doing it and the person is succeeding. Then maybe, if you're not lucky, you're being caught. You're tempting me now to say maybe there could be some other ministers who have also. Well, I'm being tempted to say that, but then we are not trying to indict anyone. But as a matter of fact, it is a serious matter that needs to be tackled from the grassroots, like Samuel has said. Now, let's get to talk about the Pengassin and Dangote refinery issue. As a matter of fact, it was on the papers today. Some Nigerians couldn't hold it back anymore. As a matter of fact, some Nigerians are saying, hey, come on. Now, the economy and union, which is more important? And some are asking questions. Does it mean unions have the power to cripple the economy of a nation? Then this is a two-sided coin. You look at it from both sides. Pengassin will come out, Nupeng will come out and tell you what they are fighting for. Then you sit back and think a little bit to see if what they are saying is true or not. Then you look at the average Nigerians, and then you look at the intervention from the federal government itself. Now, as it is right now, some Nigerians have said, the likes of Kuka, Peter Side, and a lot of very prominent Nigerians have come out to say, well, unionism is not supposed to be to the detriment of the economy. But these are people fighting for their rights in their own rights.
Okay, first of all, again, there's a little gutter approach as to how I say that again, gutter approach to the way we approach many issues in this country, including issues of national interests. If it's not political, it is union related and what have you. Of course, there are a few other unions now also threatening strikes, especially within the academic space, right? But let's talk about this instant one in front of us, which is the one that has to do with Pengassin and of course the Dangote refinery. Let's be clear. Unions are a creation of the law. So unions are not just a gang that came up from nowhere. They are a creation of the law. In fact, that's why in the case of Nigeria, you have the National Industrial Courts. It's a special court for union or labor-specific matters. All right? Why is this important? It's important because nobody is above the law, at least in principle, including the union leaders themselves. And that's the reason if they step out of the confines of the law, they also pay a price for it in the eye of the law. And the federal government too is not above the law. And that's why we always talk about dialogue between the federal government and these unions, regardless of what issues are at stake. And now, let's drill down to the Dangote issue. From the story we have, from what news has reported, 800 persons were being fired, right? And then the union says, no, you have to reinstate them. Dangote says, no, we're a privately run entity. We are profit-oriented. We do not have apologies over that. Union says, okay, if you won't reinstate them, we shut down the economy, starting with the refinery. And Dangote says, you can't pick up my refinery. Now, there have been arguments back and forth about this. There are those who say Dangote took several billions In fact, in Naira terms, trillions of loans to be able to set up a refinery, something that Nigeria has not been able to do for decades. We have 4 refineries, and today here, Port Harcourt is performing at 60% capacity. Warri is 40%. The next day is Komatos. At some point, you're now wondering if what the authorities are telling you is in alignment with the facts on the ground regarding those refineries. So for many people, Dangote refinery is the bright light in the dark room, if you know what I mean. Therefore, we must do everything to protect it. And that's the point, again, that the vice president was making the other time, which is the reason Pengassan has come to rail against him. That's another conversation in itself. But what we're saying is this. In a country where you have the interest of over 200 million human beings at stake, do you shut down an economy because of 800 people? Again, most of them have the livelihoods of these over 200 million people tied to them, tied to those jobs. The fact of the matter is, until we have the rule of law entrenched, we are going to continue to have this survival of the fittest approach to everything. It's going to be between the federal government and union, which one is more powerful. Of course, but people say you don't beat yam because of cocoyam, and you don't beat cocoyam because of yam. You can't sink the union because of Dangote refinery. You also can't drive Dangote refinery into the ground because of the union. So where does one person's right start or stop and the other person's right begins? That's what we should be asking at this point in time. Again, let's be clear. Dangote has said we're not firing them anymore. We're just going to redeploy them to other segments of our conglomerate because it's a group of companies, all right? And the union also cannot fire that. Dangote is a private entity. And as such, it has the rights or the powers to hire and fire. But again, it must do that in a way that it aligns squarely with the law. There are labor laws. It's just that we live in a country.
You're talking about labor laws. Does labor law work in Nigeria? Because
we're going to come to, okay, the question is, beyond labor, how many laws work in Nigeria, for example?
Okay.
So let's all right. I want to hold my peace. Yes, I want to go here. We talked about labor laws, for example. In fact, you don't want to hear some things they said. I'm very sure most employers in Nigeria will not be happy with that conversation that we had on scale of justice. Because if you look at the position of the law and look at how organizations treat employees, how organizations make one contractor an employee and behave the opposite, for example, you realize that, well, let's just say we don't have law, but there are laws. But the question is, who will enforce those laws?
that's the big question right now. Who will enforce those laws? Those laws actually exist, but then the enforcement, they said the judiciary is the last hope of the common man, but then there is a twist to all of this. Let's come back now to Dangote refineries. These things happening, does it mean there is no law guiding all of these things? The actions of the union, the interventions of the federal government. Now we have Nigerians speaking now, like I was said, the likes of Sanusi, you know, the likes of Kuka, the likes of Ote, the likes of Peter Side. They couldn't keep quiet anymore. They need to wade into the situation, saying, hey, come on, this is union we're talking about here. Unionism and the economy, which is greater. But then, what do you think, okay, has been, let me just put it, your assessment of the role of the federal government in all of this saga?
Well, this has been ongoing for a reasonable amount of time now, which is now being disturbing. Now, the federal government, let's say the vice president stepped on to have a conversation around this and said we need to treat our own rights. Basically, he's just trying to balance the whole thing. Now, let's look at Dangote now, for instance. The man is a businessman. Obviously, he's in business to make profits. And again, he says he got a loan worth $20 billion to get the refinery running. Just like what Mr. Oyi rightly mentioned, we have 4 refineries. How far? With anyone, how well is that working? We hear this report today, we hear that report tomorrow, and it has just been back and forth. Now, talking about the economy now and the union. Number one, the economy, it's larger than the union because obviously over 200 million Nigerians are depending on the economy, which the president has promised to overturn its GDP to around 1 trillion naira. So we are still looking towards that and hoping that the policies he's introducing would help. Now, will the president stand with his policies and watch just the unions to make sure that the other part of Nigerians don't get the dividends of having him as a president? Of course, he wouldn't fold his hand to watch all of that, all of his efforts being thrown into tower. So now, the union guys now, basically, it's also alleged that most of the drivers of Dangote refinery are Indians. That was what is being alleged. We heard that story too. Now, this is all boiling down to interests. Basically, the union are looking out for their own people, and then this man is being, kind enough to say, okay, we are not letting them go. We are going to move them to a different department. So based on that conversation now, the economy needs to come first, and I'm certain that the president would sit down and fold his arms and watch the unionists, take over and then try to put an economy or one sector of the rich economy of Nigeria into jeopardy based on the fact that some things are not being met. People are not dancing to their tune, I would say. But looking at it now as it stands now, all of this is happening now is affecting the country at large. Though we have fuel, but now there's panic buying ongoing. Now this automatically now is going to lead to the high cost of food items in the markets, which is what we've been struggling to come out from for the past years now. So a whole lot is actually happening, but the economy obviously should come first before any individual or any union's interest, basically.
All right, you said something. We talked about this, okay, off cam.
Yes.
The issue of these drivers is the Indians also.
Yes.
And the same, I could remember there was a press briefing by Penderson where they were bittered that some of the jobs that Nigerians should do, they are bringing people from India and other countries to do it in the name of expatriate, when there are Nigerians that can do those jobs. While you were speaking, something struck me. I was like, do these Indians know the route, how to transport, drive from one state to the other, or they are going to use map? Well, that's a story for
well, possibly it might not just be in the angle of driving alone. Maybe there are other angles that there's like I rightly mentioned, I mentioned interest. Individuals will obviously want to push narrative that will suit them and favor them. So now when you hear now from the horse's mouth, you definitely know that, okay, there's actually a part that this other party is not letting the general public know. As it stands now, even if there are Indians and there are foreigners working in Nigeria, that means those individuals have actually made themselves available to be able to occupy those roles and do those jobs perfectly. Just like this fear of the fact that AI is going to take away people's job. If you don't want AI to take your job, then learn how to use the tool. Then your job won't be lost. So if there is actually any part that foreigners are taking, that means those individuals have actually availed themselves to handle those those roles in that specific organization. Then if we're Nigerians now back home, we can be able to improve ourselves and then work and gather that skill to be able to do that job and apply for that job and get shortlisted and hopefully get the job. Then we wouldn't be having this conversation. But the thing now is, individuals will definitely want to push a narrative that will favor them, so as the other party would look as if he's sabotaging or trying to,
of course,
bring the economy.
In fact, we are not even sure whether those guys are Indians or not. But whatever happens, I think they are defending the interests of course, the Nigerian.
Sorry, if you don't know, for 20 seconds, let me just add to that quickly, because Odi raised a very salient factor, right? The idea of all 800 people are, number one, India, and then they are drivers, they are truck drivers. You see, the petroleum industry is quite complex. I mean, if you look at the Petroleum Industry Act in itself, you don't know where to start from, you don't know where to end. You have the upstream sector, you have the midstream sector, you have the downstream sector. This conversation about Dangote and Pegasus is squarely about the downstream sector. And haulage is just one aspect of it.
Yes.
Haulage is broad. Haulage is not just about Sam and I driving truck on the road. There are technicalities to it, there is technology to it. So it is quite a broad-based aspect of the conversation.
So there could be need.
Right. Exactly. So it's not just a question of you have a driver's license, you've been on in a truck, behind a truck steering for 20 years on the road. It's beyond that. So I think we need to continue to study this to understand the nitty-gritty in the story.
Well, we need to do a lot of study to actually come up with that. Our time is already up. We would have loved to talk about one very important issue again, but won't be able to talk about that today. The desk will still return, and of course, that's going to be on Friday. We're going to have another discussion here on Friday. Well, we are doing this discussion so that you can have a better understanding on what the papers are saying, especially topics that have striking topics. So many thanks for joining us on the desk this evening.
Always a pleasure, Ramsey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Samuel, for joining us on the desk this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Many thanks to all our viewers for being part of the desk this evening. And as a matter of fact, we want to say a very big thank you to everyone that has made this successful. This is the size of the desk today. Many thanks for joining us once again. My name is Ramsey Enoch Agbo. Bye-bye for now.